What is good and what is up, y'all? It's your boy here, Jay, back and better than ever with another episode of Chargers Banter. The Chargers go ahead and catch a dub in Miami over the Dolphins 29 to 27 after back-to-back losses to NFC East opponents. Looking to continue this W train going forward. We're going to talk about it all right here on this special edition of Chargers Banter. What's up, y'all, and welcome back to another episode of Chargers Banter. The Chargers get back to their winning ways after back-to-back losses to NFC East opponents in the Giants and Commanders, and went to Miami this past Sunday and took out the Dolphins 29 to 27 in a lot closer game than people had expected. Tua Tagovailoa took the lead with 40 seconds left after a crazy comeback from the Dolphins, who came back throughout the entire fourth quarter, all for naught, as Justin Herbert went down for a game-winning drive and sealed the deal with a Dicker the Kicker game-winning field goal. But as you can see, guys, this is a special edition of Chargers Banter. I'm back in my homeroom where I originally wanted to start this entire podcast, but finally doing so. You see all my flags, you see all my memorabilia or bed or whatever you want to call it. I got some more stuff over here, but I'm finally getting this thing underway in my room, in my house, something that I've been wanting to do for quite some time now. I mean, one of my first TikTok videos was literally in this room, but long story short, I'm finally getting this thing going, even if it is just Chargers Banter. Want to get something going, and we're going to be having a lot more episodes here coming soon in this room, hopefully. But with all that being said, finally getting this thing going. But back to the point, the Chargers get the W after back-to-back losses is big time. I know our entire offensive line is completely depleted, and our team for that matter. It's just been a whirlwind of IR misery, and we just trying to find our footing, trying to find a rhythm. And I've lamented to this in my last podcast about the thing that's going to hurt this Chargers team the most isn't going to be the fact that players are going to be out. More so, it's going to be the inconsistencies of players being out. I think not having a rhythm with the guys that you have, not understanding who's going to be there tomorrow is something that really hurts the quarterback in this team. I think that Justin does all he can with the line that he has, and not to throw any shade at our offensive line, because I understand that they're doing all that they can, but it's not the best. So we take all the things that we look at and consider, and we understand that although we got the win and although we are 4-2, there is a lot to be worked on with this team going forward, especially from the GM spot. Ortiz is going to have to make some moves as far as what he wants to do with this team going forward. This roster right now is just not where it needs to be. And you could just tell by, when you see the social media videos of Jim Harbaugh kind of giving his speeches after the game. It was a great speech, but you could just tell the energy wasn't there. There was a lot of, angst, a lot of anxiety because of what has happened with a ton of injuries to not just players, but key players that we need. And, like I said, just because we got the win, that's great. I always want to get a win, and that's the biggest goal here at the end of the day. But you could just tell that the energy was down because of what has transpired with the injuries, the inconsistency of play, the penalties, and the things that honestly would put us in a lot better position. I feel like if we had a little bit healthier offensive line and if we limited the penalties, these games wouldn't be as close as they are. But we have a Tua Tagovailoa comeback. We were up by 10, 15 points at one time, and it's just something that you can't have happen, right? With a team like the Miami Dolphins, who are completely depleted. I understand that they're playing inspiring football, but at the end of the day, that is a team that we should bury and put away. And all we needed was one more field goal to really bury this team, to make it a three-possession game. They came back and took the lead. So let's get right into it, what had happened and transpired to get to this very moment. But like I said, the Chargers beat the Dolphins 29 to 27. Chargers go ahead and take down the Miami Dolphins in Miami 29 to 27 in a closer game than it may have seemed. Dolphins made it close with their late surge of offense and taking the lead with a TD from Tua to Darren Waller with 40 seconds left, only for Justin Herbert to do all he could, avoiding sacks, 2 sacks in one, and hitting Lad McConkey on a crosser for a 40-yard scamper to put the Chargers in prime position for the Dicker the Kicker game-winning field goal to break the back-to-back losses and now move to 4-2 instead of 3-3. Justin Herbert is a different breed, who is one of two players with 18 plus game-winning drives since 2020. No other quarterback has done that besides Patrick Mahomes, going ahead and shedding off Jalen Phillips and making sure we were in prime position to go out and get this W after taking a commanding lead and losing it in the third quarter. Herbert was 29 of 38, 264, two touchdowns, 112 passer rating, and sealing the game with that game-winning drive while getting help from the likes of Kamani Vidal, who had 18 carries for 124 yards, paying dividends in the run game, even though Herb also passed the ball 39 times now, 38 times. Now, I lamented towards that and what I feel needs to be done. Earlier on in the game, they were going 50-50, 50 run, 50 pass, and it wasn't really working because nobody respects your run, right? And I feel when you have a quarterback of Justin Herbert's caliber, when you go out and you pass the ball first, they're going to have to respect your pass. It opens up a lot more lanes for Kamani Vidal, right? Kamani Vidal isn't a downhill runner, but he had 18 carries for 124 yards. And what does that say to you? That the it was open. A lot of these holes were open because of the fact that we were throwing the ball 38 times. Now, if we throw the ball 20 times, 25 times, Kamani Vidal is probably not going to have the success that he did. But like I lamented in my last podcast, I need Greg Roman to get away from the 50-50. I understand he was a lot more run heavy than years past, and I understand that this year specifically on first and second downs, he is, you know, in I think in like past 20 years, throwing the ball the most anybody has had in the first two downs in NFL history since I believe, like I said, like 1990s. So when you consider all of that and all the injuries that we have, what makes you think that we're going to run the ball effectively when we have our entire offensive line depleted? So back to my point, Justin throwing the ball 38 times helped Kamani Vidal get 18 carries for 124 yards and really helped Justin again, right? Him helping Kamani helping Justin is essentially what happened. And Ladd also went crazy, having his breakout game of the year, 7 receptions for 100 yards and a TD. Oronde Gadsden, also a breakout game, having 7 receptions, 68 yards. Just what we want to see from the tight end position. He will be our number one tight end going forward in pass scheme specifically. I'm not sure wholeheartedly how his pass blocking is, but he is going to be the number one tight end when it comes into passing situations. Oronde did have a fumble, and so did Keenan, but that's unlike both, and we just need to protect the football there. I understand that. Our defense played pretty well also till the end when we got relaxed and let Tua drive consistently, but we did have 3 interceptions with 2 sacks and 4 TFLs, 1 sack coming from our new acquisition in Ndafe Owe from the Ravens, already showing our defense, and Tuli continuing to dominate with his 2 QB hits, adding to his pressures, fourth most in the league. Like I said, 3 picks in 2 crucial moments and 1 in garbage time by Derwin James to seal the deal on the game with seconds left. We continue to play defense like this, our offense will hopefully prevail, right? I understand that we let them come back later on in the game, but if we continue to play the defense that we are playing in the first half of these games, I don't think anybody can touch us as long as our offense can at least put 14 to 21 points on the board. That's an expectation. I think that that's a very low expectation, right? We have so much more firepower to put a lot more points on the board, but at the end of the day, where we are sitting right now in the IR, it just we have to have a lower expectation of what is going to happen with this Chargers team because truthfully, I don't, who knows? We're dropping like flies at this point, and it doesn't look hopeful. But Tua did struggle. But did have key turnovers. He didn't struggle, rather, but did have key turnovers to hurt the team. 21 of 32, 205, a TD, and 3 interceptions with the 54 pass rating. So what I'm saying is he didn't struggle from the broad, I guess, getting your team in a prime position to win the game is what I'm trying to say. Stats didn't jump off the board, but when you have 3 interceptions and key interceptions at that, it's going to hurt your team. Achane went off having his first 100-yard game of the season, having 16 carries for 120 yards. Shocker that the Chargers led up their first 100-yard rusher to Devon Achane. 2 TDs as well, averaging 8 yards a carry. So he absolutely mopped our run defense up and had a day. Waddle also had 6 receptions for 95 yards, but just wasn't enough in the end as those turnovers hurt. Ultimately, the Dolphins played better and more competitive football than I've seen all season with Tyreek out. Tyreek or not, sorry. And to be honest, I'm not sure where you go where you go from here if you're trying to keep these guys in Tua, Mike, and Tyreek and Devon A-Chain, but it might be time to move on from McDaniel to try a new face and eventually see what Tua can bring to the table. I personally just think with the post-game conference that has been, you know, over time, the post-game conferences over time throughout the season, it's they've lived it up and now their time's up. It just seems like the marriage that is on the verge of a divorce. You can't say anything to each other and try and fix what has transpired when it comes to success. That's the worst type of situation and relationship that you want. It just doesn't matter what you say to each other. You already know what's transpired, and you can't kind of you know come back from it. Essentially, is what I'm saying. Such a high after the first season with Mike McDaniel, and then an all-time low um, in this present day, and the team doesn't respect nor want to play for him. Ultimately, it's time to see what a new face brings and eventually move on from Tua if you have to. But it's run its course, and I don't think that you can go anywhere from here. And I don't know what else to do. But in the end, I think the Dolphins should keep the core and try something new. But we will see. Like I said, I don't think that Tua is completely the problem. You obviously paid him, so you definitely want to keep him around and see what he's capable of in the coming futures and him kind of putting himself out there, wanting to continue to play after all the injuries that he's had. So, with all that being said, you want to try and continue your trust in Tua, but with the post game conferences, they don't look very promising. A lot of Dolphins fans, a lot of fans in general, are calling Tua out for not being accountable, for never being accountable, for always blaming other things, for not. And you saw it in this most recent post game interview where he was kind of blaming guys that weren't showing up to, player only meetings, showing up late to player only meetings, not showing up to film stuff like that, right? And I think that has nothing to do with Tua per se. Yes, there is part of a leadership culture that you want to culminate and make sure that people understand, but that is not your say nor doing to force these guys to go, right? This is a professional job. This is a job that kids and adults dream about having. And just to understand that there's players in the organization, in the NFL, let alone, that don't even want to show up to player only meetings or want to show up to film. Um, it speaks volumes to what kind of character of guys that you have on your team. If you have dudes that are in the NFL that don't even want to show up to film, want to show up to player only meetings. And that's the thing about it. I think there's such a selfish culture lately in all of sports, right? When it comes to money, when it comes to NIL, when it comes to just the image of people, social media, what you're getting, from all these, ads and just a ton of stuff, right? Because you can get so much money and so much, I guess what you can call it is just limelight from all of these things. But yet again, like you boil it down to what is the main problem, and it's the players, it's the leadership, it's the culture, it starts from the top, right? Not sure, what's going on with the ownership there, but I'm not going to go as far as to say that that is the problem. Um, but ultimately, ownership does hire GMs, and GMs do hire coaches, and like I said, it starts all from the top. It's just so hard to understand what is going on in Miami after such a high a couple years ago. Like I said, I think it's run its course. I don't think you move on from Tua because you have paid so much money, but you also kind of want to look in the future, right? Because he hasn't really given you a ton of promise when it comes to what the future may hold. Tyreek looked like he wants out, and nobody wants to play for Mike McDaniel. So you try to figure out what's going on here. I'm not sure if you blow it up, but you definitely try to get a new face in there and try to change the energy in the locker room because it's not there. It's just not there for the Miami Dolphins after, like I said, such a high 2 years ago. A lot of people were praising them and really saying that this was the new contender in the AFC, especially the AFC East. And man, has that taken a turn for the worst? Going from an AFC divisional game in Kansas City getting blown out. I think that was the last time that we really saw the Miami Dolphins at all. as a unit, as a cohesive unit, and really just clicking on all cylinders. And even that game, they weren't doing good because it was freezing temperatures, and they didn't know how to handle it. So at the end of the day, guys, I'm not trying to bash on the Miami Dolphins. That's just my 2 cents because I don't know truthfully what I would do if I were a fan of the Miami Dolphins right now. I'd probably have a bag over my head. I'd probably not be happy with what's going on. I mean, the success hasn't been there in the past 20 years. Um, and it's time to really put the foot down and try and figure out what is the issue. If it is it the owner, is it the time to start boycotting, these games to understand that, maybe Miami isn't going to be supportive of a team that is going to be so lackluster year in and year out. Yeah, you had flashes of going to the playoffs here and there, but hasn't had consistent success in years. So again, not trying to bash them, but that's just my 2 cents on what they should probably do because this Dolphins core is good. You got Waddle, you got Achan, you got Tua, you got Tyreek. I mean, and the defense isn't bad. The defense isn't bad, but it's just got to change. It's got to change. But as for the Bolts, it was a solid and much needed victory, especially after those two losses. But injuries continue to plague this team. The first half of this game was rather lackluster as they only scored 30 field goals thanks to Dicker the kicker, but that won't cut it. Dicker did end with 5 for 5 with field goals and 2 for 2 with extra points. Thanks to him, we wouldn't have won this game. The offense needs to find a way to get a rhythm early. I've lamented to about Roman is that he needs to try passing Rock more, and that's what I was saying earlier in this podcast, and did so in the game. Thankfully, after the half, otherwise we would have been cooked. We were so run heavy in the first half. We were 50-50 at half again in terms of running and passing. And with no linemen and injuries everywhere, what makes you think that we're going to have this? What that's going to work? Herbert passing will open up the run game because no one respects the run game as much as they respect Herbert's arm. So that's why you go ahead and pass the ball with your superstar QB. But we got to win. We got the win, and that's what matters at the end of the day. We move forward with what we got, but the defense needs to play a tad better towards the end of the game. Now, look into next Sunday as we face the Colts on Sunday against Daniel Jones, just absolutely tearing it up. And, the Colts are a scary team. I'm very concerned about what's going to happen. We do play them at home, but at the end of the day, this Colts team has a solid all-around unit. Their offensive line is great. Their run game is great. Daniel Jones isn't a great quarterback, but he's playing great football. The wide receivers are playing great for him as well. The defense is playing lights out. This Colts team is very scary. I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about them because of the fact that they haven't been doing anything specifically flashy. But Daniel Jones is showing out. I think Daniel Jones is having a career year because of the fact that he has the pieces around him and finally has an offensive line that can block for him. No shade to the Giants, but you know, you see what Jackson Dart is going through right now. I mean, he's tearing it up in the sense that he's winning these ball games and getting the team in prime position to win, but he's running for his life 90% of the time. He's scrambling 90% of the time, and that's really what's making them win. If he wasn't scrambling, he'd be getting sacked like 5 or 6 times a game. But back to the point, Daniel Jones is finally coming into fruition of what people thought he would be as a quarterback. I don't think anybody thought that he would be amount to more than he was at the Giants, but he has really developed over time as a passer through these past couple of weeks in a Indianapolis Colts uniform. And once you get that going with the legs that he has, because he is mobile, and I think that a lot of people kind of disregard that when they think about Daniel Jones. Sometimes they're like, oh, he's not fast. He's actually one of the fastest quarterbacks in the league besides Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray. So when you consider those things, you got to be careful with this Colts team. Not to mention that they can go ahead and hand it off to Jonathan Taylor, who's one of the best backs in the entire NFL. So this defense, our Chargers defense, is going to have a full plate in front of them, going to have to deal with a lot. But I think it's something that we need also for our testing of the defense to kind of just test different things. I feel like we're playing down to our talent, truthfully. I feel like we're playing down to the teams that we are playing, and we're not playing the defense that we should. Offense is a different story because of the injuries and the inconsistencies that I have lamented. But truthfully, the defense has been the unit that has been most healthy through the entire year. And what you have to do is continue to try and get better each and every day. get better each and every Sunday. And against this Colts team, we're going to have a real tester, right? We have lost 2 games to the Commanders and the Giants, but truthfully, I don't think those teams are as well rounded as this Indianapolis Colts team. The way that they can run the ball, the way that they can pass the ball, the play action, all of it. Daniel Jones escaping from the pocket and running. There's a lot of things that you have to account for. And I understand Jaden Daniels is just like that as well, but Jaden Daniels was playing on a hobbled knee and wasn't really running around as much as we thought he would. So back to the point, I think that Indianapolis is going to be a dangerous team. I'm looking forward to it. 5-2 is much better than 4-3, but at the end of the day, I know that we're hobbled. I know that we're working with all that we got. This bye week can't come any sooner. But like I said, guys, I'm looking forward to the next week, and I'm glad that we got the dub this past weekend while I was at the crib. And next time I'll be at the crib, I'm going to be Thanksgiving, so we're going to be getting some Thanksgiving podcasts in. But with all that being said, I appreciate you guys tuning in. That is a wrap of this episode of Chargers Banter, and special edition of Chargers Banter in my room, my sanctuary, and like I said, guys, I appreciate you guys tuning in, and hopefully we get this dub next week. Go Bolts up, you know what I'm saying? But stay optimistic, understanding that, yes, there are injuries, but, we can't be too high on our horse, y'all. We can't be too high on our horse. We got to stay level-headed and continue to go throughout this season the way that we're going about it. Right now, we're looking good. Trajectory's looking up. But like I said, keep the optimism. But that is a wrap. Thank you guys for tuning in to this special edition of Chargers Banter, and I'll see you guys in this room on Thanksgiving, but I'll see you guys next week. We out.